Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Thursday, July 18, 2024. Former President Donald Trump gives his acceptance speech tonight to become the Republican presidential nominee on this fourth and final day of the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee. One expected theme, unity, after last weekend's attempted assassination of Donald Trump. Vice President Kamala Harris campaigns in Fayetteville, North Carolina, criticizing Wednesday night's speech at the convention of Republican vice presidential nominee, Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio. President Joe Biden's doctor says he is still experiencing mild symptoms after his COVID-19 diagnosis. As there are more reports today that senior Democrats in the House and Senate are working to convince the president to abandon his reelection run. We'll get Biden-Harris campaign official response. And in the Middle East, the Israeli Knesset passes a resolution opposing an independent Palestinian state. The White House spokesperson John Kirby has asked how this could affect an effort to reach a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. Associated Press reports from Milwaukee, Donald Trump takes the stage Thursday at the Republican National Convention to accept his party's nomination again and give his first speech since he was cut off mid-sentence in a flurry of gunfire in an assassination attempt at a rally in Pennsylvania. Trump's wife, Melania, is expected to make her first appearance at the convention for the address, which will conclude the four-day convention in Milwaukee. Trump appeared each of the first 3 days with a white bandage on his ear covering a wound he sustained in the Saturday shooting. Trump has said the shooting also led him to change the speech from what was going to be a humdinger made up largely of attacks on President Joe Biden to one more focused on bringing the country together. That was from Associated Press. Corey Lewandowski is a senior advisor to the Republican National Convention and was Donald Trump's first campaign manager in 2016. He was interviewed today by Michael Duffy, Washington Post opinions editor-at-large.
Tonight, former President Trump will address the convention. As everyone knows, he said he tore up his original speech and is trying to strike a more unifying tone. How come?
Well, Michael, when you have leaders who undergo significant change in America, whether it's the bombing of Pearl Harbor, whether it's Gettysburg, whether it's the 9/11 attacks, or now an attempted assassination on these leaders, what those great leaders all have in common is they try and unify coming out of something like that. And so tonight, I think what you're going to see is a president in Trump who is going to talk about that our best days are still in front of us. That's not to say the Republican Party and Democratic Party don't have differences of which way we want to take the direction of this country. But at the end of the day, while politics is important, the most important thing is being able to come home and see your family at the end of the day. So I think what you're going to see is a conciliatory, unifying President Trump, a very different speech than probably what would have been delivered prior to the assassination attempt on his life last Saturday.
Are you able to talk a little bit more about how he will be conciliatory?
Well, look, I think what the President Trump wants to lay out this evening is the notion that we can do this together, that our best days, like Ronald Reagan said, are still in front of us. We can still be that shining city on the hill. I don't want to give away any of his speech because I know that he has worked very diligently to rewrite that speech, to have an opportunity to talk not just to the people in the arena this evening and not just to the Republicans across this country, but to those independents, those Democrats, those disenfranchised individuals who are tired of the way our country is currently running. And, Michael, one of the big audiences that I'm sure President Trump is going to be speaking to tonight are those independent women, the so-called Nikki Haley voters, the ones who supported her during her campaign. And I thought it was very magnanimous of Ambassador Haley to release her delegates so that Donald Trump could accept those delegates and, by and large, be nominated by acclamation.
You've known President Trump a long time, longer than a lot of people in his circle. Do you have reason to think he's been changed by the events of the last week?
I absolutely think he has been changed. I don't think anybody who has gone through a trauma like that can't be changed. Donald Trump has always been and had this air of invincibility to him, a larger-than-life figure. And millimeters made the difference between him being able to speak tonight to the Republican convention and us planning a funeral. And that's really, if that can't humble a man, I don't know what would. And, Michael, as you watched the convention last night and saw his granddaughter talk about him and him in the audience, you could see the emotion in Donald Trump, something that very few people over the course of the last decade have seen. A Donald Trump who was not just this tough, bravado individual, but a man whose family cares about him very deeply. And the statement that Melania Trump, the former First Lady, put out after the shooting was not about politics. It was about the man she loves, the family man that he is, and what it means to be able to come home at night. And I think you're seeing that in him, and I think you'll see that of him this evening.
Corey Lewandowski, a senior advisor to the Republican National Convention, in a Washington Post live interview today. Other speakers at tonight's fourth and final day of the convention include the leaders of the Senate and House campaign committees, Senator Steve Daines of Montana, Congressman Richard Hudson of North Carolina, also former Secretary of State under Donald Trump, Mike Pompeo, Alina Habba, one of Donald Trump's attorneys, Tucker Carlson, political commentator, evangelist Franklin Graham, Eric Trump, son of Donald Trump, and Hulk Hogan, the retired professional wrestler, along with Dana White, CEO of Ultimate Fighting Championship. We'll have live coverage on C-SPAN Radio and C-SPAN Television. Senator Ron Johnson, Republican of Wisconsin, spoke today about Donald Trump's speech tonight at a prayer breakfast in Milwaukee.
We will see what happens tonight, but I think one of my main points is that I don't care who you are. Had you just narrowly escaped death, was that moment part of an event where an American hero lost his life sheltering and shielding and protecting his family, where two other Americans were grievously injured? That would change your life. I think we're getting an indication from President Trump that his life has been changed. I mean, I think we all here think this is providential. Something whispered in his ear. He turned his head, he looked at the chart. His life was spared, and now he has a new lease on life, and he can put it to good use. I'm a Tea Party guy, right? I ran because I thought we were mortgaging our children's future. I've been saying for the time I've been in the Senate that the greatest threat facing our nation is our debt and deficit. For the last couple of years, I've said, yeah, that's still a problem. We're exacerbating the problem. We haven't fixed it. Right now, the greatest threat to our nation is the fact that we are horribly divided politically. And it was Abraham Lincoln, during the period of the Civil War, said that, quoting scripture, that a house divided against itself cannot stand. That was true then, is true today. Now, I'm not always the most uplifting character because I just tell the truth and I describe reality. And right now, reality is pretty grim. But I always try and provide people hope with the reality that, yeah, we're horribly divided, but we're not a naturally divided people. Think of it. On the big things in life, the major goals, safety, security, enough opportunities so we can take care of our family and ourselves. The fact that we love this country. I don't care where you're on the political spectrum. Most Americans love this love this country. I hope a lot of Americans share faith in God. So on those big things, we're completely united. And by the way, proof of my thesis here is in moments of real tragedy, I mean massive tragedy, whether it's national like 9/11 or hurricanes, tornadoes, whatever, Americans, we come together just like that. We become one people. So I truly hope, and we will hear tonight, and I'm praying that the message President Trump delivers is what he's indicating. He said he had a humdinger speech, or whatever he called it. He laid that aside. He said he's going to deliver a speech of unity. Our nation needs to be healed and unified, and we have to lead the way.
Senator Ron Johnson, Republican from Wisconsin, at the Faith and Freedom Coalition prayer breakfast in Milwaukee this morning. The breakfast titled God and Country. And Donald Trump, former president and the Republican presidential nominee this year, will be giving his acceptance speech tonight. Live coverage of the convention, gavel to gavel, on the C-SPAN networks. The Republican vice presidential nominee this year, Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio, also spoke at the breakfast this morning, talking about his own faith, how he was raised by a religious grandmother, the mama he spoke of in last night's convention speech, how he fell away from it in the Marines and in college, considering himself an atheist, and then how he returned. He said he was baptized in 2018 or 19. Senator Vance also spoke about faith and the Republican Party agenda.
There has been a lot of rumbling in the past few weeks that the Republican Party of now and the Republican Party of the future is not going to be a place that's welcoming to social conservatives. And really, from the bottom of my heart, I want to say that is not true. Social conservatives have a seat at this table, and they always will, so long as I have any influence in this party. And President Trump, I know, agrees. But when I talk about his uniqueness in politics, I think one of the great virtues of his approach to politics that his critics will slander in every which way, but President Trump is uniquely capable and aware of politics being the art of the possible. What can we accomplish in the here and now? How do we advance the ball 1 yard before we advance it 10 yards before we advance it to a touchdown? And so I'd ask my social conservative friends, as you see the administration unfold, as you see the campaign unfold, remember that this is a guy who delivered for social conservatives more than any president in my 39 years of life. I think he deserves a little bit of grace, and he deserves a little bit of trust, and I hope that we will all provide that to him. I certainly know that as his running mate, I will.
Senator J.D. Vance, Republican vice presidential nominee at the Faith and Freedom Coalition prayer breakfast in Milwaukee this morning. An article from Fox News reads, the Republican Party has softened many of the social policy pillars within its platform, including the traditionally sacrosanct issue of abortion. While the Republican National Convention is going on this week, Democratic President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris have been flying around the country doing reelection campaign events. The president trips have been sidelined for the moment by his COVID-19 diagnosis. He's recovering at his home in Delaware. But Vice President Kamala Harris is keeping the schedule, making a stop today in Fayetteville, North Carolina, talking about Senator Vance.
So some of you may have heard Donald Trump's running mate deliver remarks at the Republican National Convention. He talked about his life story about growing up in Southwest Ohio, and it was compelling. It's a compelling story. And it was not the full story. Frankly, what is very telling is what he did not talk about on that stage. He did not talk about Project 2025, their 900-page blueprint for a second Trump term. He did not talk about it because their plans are extreme and they are divisive. In recent days, they've been trying to portray themselves as the party of unity. But here's the thing. If you claim to stand for unity, you need to do more than just use the word. You cannot claim you stand for unity if you are pushing an agenda that deprives whole groups of Americans of basic freedoms, opportunity, and dignity. You cannot claim you stand for unity if you are intent on taking reproductive freedoms from the people of America and the women of America. Trying to ban abortion nationwide as they do and restrict access to IVF and contraception as their plan calls for. You cannot claim to be for unity if you try to overturn a free and fair election and threaten to terminate the United States Constitution. And you cannot claim to be for unity when your entire economic agenda is designed to prioritize billionaires and big corporations over the middle class. We're too busy watching what you're doing to hear what you're saying. And let us unpack that last point about the economy. This race can be boiled down to a single question. who fights for you? Now, we know whose side our President Joe Biden is on. He grew up in a middle-class family in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and he has never forgotten where he came from. And I have been a firsthand witness.
Vice President Kamala Harris campaigning today in Fayetteville, North Carolina. A story from The Hill. Trump campaign senior advisor Chris LaCivita strongly admonished the efforts of the conservatives behind Project 2024, the Heritage Foundation's policy blueprint for a future GOP administration. LaCivita said at a CNN Politico event in Milwaukee as part of the Republican National Convention, "These people do not speak for him. They do not speak for the campaign. We're the ones putting out policy. In a perfect world, from their perspective, they would love to drive the issues set. They don't get to do that." The article says the moderator Jonathan Martin asked, "They're jamming you?" And LaCivita responded, "They're a pain in the ass." That from The Hill. Another AP article, former President Barack Obama has privately expressed concerns to Democrats about President Joe Biden's candidacy. And Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi privately warned Biden that Democrats could lose the ability to seize control in the House if they didn't step away from the race. Pelosi also showed Biden polling that he likely can't defeat Republican Donald Trump, according to people familiar with the matter who insisted on anonymity to discuss it. Biden has insisted he's not backing down, adamant that he is the candidate who beat Republican Donald Trump before, and he will do it again this year. That was from Associated Press. NPR congressional reporter Deidre Walsh posting on X from Pelosi spokesperson, Speaker Pelosi respects the confidentiality of her meetings and conversations with the President of the United States. Sadly, the feeding frenzy from the press based on anonymous sources misrepresents any conversations the Speaker may have had with the President. Biden-Harris Deputy Campaign Manager Quentin Fulks and Senator Alex Padilla, Democrat of California, were among the briefers at a Democratic National Committee news conference today in Milwaukee, counter-programming to the Republican National Convention. They were asked about all those reports.
I have a question for Quentin and one for the senator. Quentin, first, how is the president doing today? And then also there are reports that he's more receptive to conversations about leaving the race. And I see you smiling. Is that true? And is the campaign working on scenarios where Vice President Harris would take the lead? And then also for Senator Padilla, your future colleague in the Senate, Adam Schiff, put out a statement calling on President Biden to pass the torch. He seems very concerned, as do many of your colleagues, that the president is going to bring the whole party down with him. Do you believe that it is sustainable for the president to stay in the race?
So on the first question, the president is feeling fine. He is self-isolating in Delaware. He's continuing to make calls and do work. He has some official meetings today, a lot of campaign calls that he's getting through. I think some Zoom calls that he's hopping on potentially. And as for the second question, look, the vice president is a part of the Biden-Harris ticket. Our campaign is not working through any scenarios where President Biden is not the top of the ticket. He is and will be the Democratic nominee. I think when it comes to if he is open or being receptive to any of that, look, the president has said it several times. He's staying in this race. I talk to the president every single day in some form of Zoom or phone call. He's usually fact-checking me on a statistic that I got wrong. 15.5 million jobs is very different than 16 million. But the president is in this race. He is going to, and we look forward to him accepting the delegates in Chicago and continuing with this race to talk about what's at stake.
And I'll just add, yes, I know President Biden well. He's not skipping a beat. He may have to isolate a little bit because of COVID, and that shouldn't surprise anybody. Look, I represent California. COVID numbers are up. It's part of our new reality. But Paxlovid, yes. Bleach, no. I'll say that again in case you didn't get it. Paxlovid, yes. Bleach, no. And so he's going to continue to work, even if it's via phone, via Zoom. He's got a tremendous day job. Let's not forget about that. And he's continuing to aggressively campaign. Now, to your question about my colleague to be Adam Schiff, who I've known for many years, respect tremendously, but couldn't disagree more on this issue. I mean, for anybody wondering whether President Biden is committed, members of Congress got a letter last week and a half ago. He's thought about it. He's been approached. And he's decided. I know, having spoken to him personally, he's committed to the campaign. He's committed to winning in November because we want to continue the progress we've made under his leadership and because we know the dangers of Donald Trump. Look, as far as the campaign goes, nobody's predicting a landslide this November in any direction. It was a very close race 4 years ago, and it's going to be a close race this November. But the numbers that I've seen, the data that I've seen, the polls that I've seen show that we're more than in the ball game. But we have 109 days left. And we need everybody in our team working hard, talking to voters, organizing, mobilizing, getting ready to get out the vote, because there's too much at stake this November to do otherwise.
Senator Alex Padilla, Democrat from California, and before that, Quentin Fulks, the deputy campaign manager for the Biden-Harris 2024 campaign, at a news conference in Milwaukee on the sidelines of the Republican National Convention. White House physician Dr. Kevin O'Connor putting out a statement today that President Joe Biden is still experiencing mild upper respiratory symptoms associated with his recent COVID-19 infection, but he has no fever and his vital signs are normal. The doctor says he continues to receive Paxlovid and will continue to conduct the business of the American people. New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu, a Republican, was interviewed today by Politico's White House correspondent and a co-author of Playbook, Eugene Daniels, about President Biden and the race.
You have said in the past that Joe Biden was not going to be the nominee of the Democratic Party. The momentum is shifting. I'm talking to folks and people who at one point were very gung-ho about him staying on, have even changed their tune behind the scenes. Are you feeling vindicated? Does it feel like you were right this entire time? You want to take a victory?
Well, no one likes an I told you so moment. No one likes an I told you so moment as much as a politician. But yeah, look, I've been saying this for well over a year. It's real. It's happening. I think what you're going to see is, obviously, this is a week of Republican unity, and I think what everyone is seeing is really positive on the Republican side. But as soon as this convention is done, around Monday morning, the whole world is going to put their cameras right on Joe Biden and say, and now what are you going to do? Because clearly the numbers aren't there. My message if I was the RNC, my message to the RNC is find someone like Frank Luntz, pay him whatever he wants, and start polling the messaging for a Kamala Harris, Andy Bashir, Kamala Harris, Josh Shapiro type ticket, because I think that's what you're going to see materialize in the next few weeks. And that is a very different race than running against Biden. And again, I think Republicans have a lot of momentum and a lot of opportunity to win big in November right now. But believe me, if and when they make the switch, everything's going to change. It's going to get very close in a lot of those tighter states. There's going to be more energy. I think the Democrat Party would effectively be rewarded, if you will, by independents for saying, hey, none of us like that whole Biden-Trump ticket to start with. You guys had the courage to change your nominee out. And it's almost like a rewarding and a re-energizing of the party there. So there's 100 days to go. A lot is going to happen in that 100 days. And I just tell Republicans, we want to win. So you better run really hard and you better strategize for kind of those tough scenarios, while we might not see them at this very moment, that are likely to materialize in the next few weeks.
New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu, a Republican, in a virtual interview with Politico reporter Eugene Daniels. Story from Atlanta News First. A new poll released Thursday shows Donald Trump only hours away from headlining the GOP convention's final night, leading President Joe Biden in all 7 potential battleground states, including Georgia. The Emerson College poll is the first large-scale presidential poll since last Saturday's attempted assassination of the former president. The poll was sponsored by Democrats for the Next Generation. Trump leads Biden in all 7 swing states: Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin by a margin of 5.2 percentage points, 46.8% to 41.6%. But the poll also found a hypothetical, quote, qualified Democratic candidate younger than Biden leads Trump in all 7 swing states by a margin of 7.4 percentage points. That article from Atlanta News First. And a story from Fox News, Senator Marsha Blackburn demanded the firing of the Secret Service director after she attempted to confront Kimberly Cheadle over the security failures that led to the assassination attempt on former President Trump. Blackburn, Republican from Tennessee, discussed the confrontation she had with Cheadle at the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee during the Faulkner Focus, warning she will have to answer for the tragic shooting. That was from Fox News. Here is Senator Blackburn's appearance.
how astounding it was that she was very comfortable in that luxury suite, having a cocktail party, saying thank you to people that had helped fund security. But Harris, she would not take 5 minutes and provide answers for the people. And we were trying to get answers on the phone call. How could the Secret Service allow their protectee, President Donald Trump, to take the stage at 6 o'clock when at 5:51 they had identified a potential threat? 5:53, they alerted the spotters and the sharpshooters, and then at 6 o'clock they clear him to go on the stage. And she is more concerned about donors than she is about the people of this country and the president. I think it speaks to the priorities and the tone deafness.
All right, I want to talk about just why she was here. And so what you now are breaking down for us is she came to thank, and the word she used when you watch the tape is partners. Yes. This was about donor support. This was about making sure that things are politically clean, perhaps, for the man in the White House. This was not about the American public. When you knew that you needed to do some foot traffic to get her, you were in heels and you were running. What was the response of her team around her? And they seem to just be letting you guys go. I mean, I think everybody wants answers. Maybe even some of our own people don't have them.
Everyone deserves answers. The taxpayers of this country, President Trump, his team, we all deserve to know what happened. People are astounded that someone could get to that building and take a clean line of sight shot at President Trump, and it is just God's divine providence that saved his life.
Senator Marsha Blackburn, Republican from Tennessee, today on Fox News Channel about what happened Wednesday night at the Republican National Convention, the video of her and other Republican senators trying to question the Secret Service director going viral. Secret Service spokesperson putting out a statement, continuity of operations is paramount during a critical incident, and U.S. Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheadle has no intentions to step down. She deeply respects members of Congress and is fiercely committed to transparency in leading the Secret Service through the internal investigation and strengthening the agency through lessons learned in these important internal and external reviews. Story in the Jerusalem Post about a White House event reads, "There's no better way to fight against the crisis of hate than by bringing people of different faiths and backgrounds together," Second Gentleman Doug Emhoff said at a roundtable of religious leaders on Thursday morning. The roundtable itself was closed to the press, but Emhoff delivered remarks beforehand. The roundtable included the United Synagogue of Conservative Judaism, the Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism, the Hindu Foundation of America, the Black Muslim Leadership Council, the National Council of Churches, and the Sikh Coalition, among others. That was from Jerusalem Post. Here's some of the remarks from Second Gentleman Doug Emhoff.
I wanted to bring this group together for a while now, and I'm glad we got to do it. I know most of you, not all, but most of you, and we've actually all done work together. And as the mayor said, this is a very difficult time in our country, in our world. And it's a difficult time for everyone in the faith community. For so long have really stuck together and been together on so many issues because there are just so many commonalities amongst us. And so I wanted to make sure I brought everyone together because right now we're in a crisis. It's a crisis of hate. And what better way to fight against it and bring us together, to bring a group like this together and to lean on our faith and to see and explore how we can use that deep faith that we all have together. Because as we know, if there are forces out there trying to divide us, they're trying to divide us and pull us apart, and in fact pit some of us against each other. That is not the way to go. We cannot allow that to happen.
Second Gentleman Doug Emhoff today at the White House leading an interfaith roundtable. Also attending the United States Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom, Rashad Hussain. Washington Today continues in a moment.
All this week, hear speeches from the Republican convention on the Campaign Trail podcast feed. You can listen to the speeches shortly after they happen each evening. Find and follow the Campaign Trail podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast wherever you find your podcasts and on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app. Fox 6 Milwaukee reports that Milwaukee Mayor Cavalier Johnson held a news conference on Thursday morning, July 18th, which marks the final day of the Republican National Convention. He said, "Welcome to the final day of the convention. It's been a pretty remarkable week, and I think it's fair to say Milwaukee has shown our visitors that the city is full of great assets and also great people. The city's preparations and performance has gone pretty smoothly." Mayor Johnson also spoke about former President Donald Trump's speech tonight accepting his party's nomination for president. And then you're going to hear the first question from a reporter about the economic impact of the convention on the city.
Tonight, the final night of the Republican National Convention, the delegates inside Pfizer Forum will hear directly from the nominee. Now, I've got some major political differences with the former president, and as he speaks, what will be going on through my mind is the contrast with him and his policies that he'll put forward and those of President Joe Biden. The Biden-Harris administration has delivered investments in people. President Joe Biden has tackled serious problems, and he's done it with real solutions. From Pfizer Forum tonight, we'll hear a false narrative of gloom, a false narrative of blame, a message from Republicans that just simply is not true. In the coming weeks, I'll have the opportunity to join another convention, the Democratic National Convention, taking place in Chicago, just 90 miles south of where we are here in Milwaukee. And there we will renominate Joe Biden and head into the fall election season. The upcoming November election is extremely, extremely important for the future of America. And if you're within the sound of my voice, I encourage you not just to register to vote, but also to cast your ballot and let your voice be heard in this election. Please vote as well. And with that, I'm happy to take a couple questions. We'll look to see what those numbers look like. I know that there are some businesses, especially nearby, that hadn't seen the uptick that they initially were expecting here. But my hope is that it presents an opportunity. Even this day will present more opportunities for people to go out and patronize those businesses. And as I've said from the beginning, the RNC is not the end. It's the beginning. It's the beginning of other large-scale events coming to Milwaukee, other large-scale political, business, sports, entertainment, trade shows, and the like. This puts the city on the map for more attendees, more visitors to come here to patronize businesses in Milwaukee.
Milwaukee Mayor Cavalier Johnson, a Democrat, part of his news conference this morning on the streets of Milwaukee. The group Visit Milwaukee estimates that the 50,000 visitors this week for the Republican National Convention will contribute $200 million to the local economy. Among the memorable moments in Wednesday night's Day 3 of the Republican National Convention, Gold Star family members of service members who died during the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan telling their stories. Also a 98-year-old World War II veteran. Kimberly Guilfoyle, former Trump campaign advisor who's now engaged to one of Donald Trump's sons, saying, "We are closer to World War III than any time in my lifetime." And Kai Trump saying that Donald Trump is just a normal grandpa. And Peter Navarro, former Trump White House trade advisor, speaking just hours after being released from prison following a 4-month term for defying a congressional subpoena in the investigation of the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol during the counting of the electoral votes that determined Joe Biden beat Donald Trump for president. Here's part of Peter Navarro from last night.
I'm sitting in prison thinking about this. It just eats at me as the Democrats come for your kids. They're indoctrinating them with poisonous attitudes on race and gender. And here's the thing, when politics fails, the investigations and prosecutions begin. They did it to me. They're going to do it to Trump. But hear me out. They've also done it to Catholics, pro-life activists, and parents who are just standing up for the kids at school board meetings. This is a tale of two Americas, and you know it wasn't this way when Donald Trump was president. I remember the days I was there. In Trump's America, you were safe and our borders were secure. In Trump's America, you were more prosperous, and you didn't have to choose between what? Food on the table, medicine in the cabinet, and a roof over your head. And in Trump's America, you didn't have to worry about being locked up for disagreeing with the government. I went to prison so you won't have to. I am your wake-up call.
Peter Navarro at the Republican National Convention Wednesday night. He was released from prison that day and traveled to Milwaukee. C-SPAN Radio and Television gives you live gavel-to-gavel coverage of the convention, both the Republican National Convention this week and the Democratic National Convention when it happens in August. We've also been checking out in Milwaukee what's happening off the floor, news media areas and vendors, sights and sounds, the history of the city, and we caught up with some college students.
Out and about the crowd here in front of the Fiserv Center, 3 students from Cornell here to learn about the convention and its relation to politics. Tell us a little bit about the program that brings you here.
Yeah, so Cornell University has an Institute of Politics and Global Affairs. They do a large amount of programming on and off the university. On the university, I believe they have a couple classes. They have a couple programs that allow students who are interested in politics to get more engaged. And, they also, I believe this is the first time, but they're sending, 7 students to both the DNC and the RNC. And, the 3 of us were lucky enough to be those chosen for that. So,
what compelled you to sign up for the program?
I mean, our interest in politics, although we don't have the same majors, we are all involved, have this interest in politics. This being our first convention for all 7 of us. So I think we're pretty excited to see what else we see tonight.
What kind of things have you been learning since being here?
Oh, it's been really cool, actually. As part of the Institute of Politics, we're meeting with a lot of New York representatives to get their take on a lot of local issues. We've met with some kind of national figures as well, and have definitely sat on just some panels so we can hear more of the national perspective of Republican politics and what it takes to run a convention and elect Trump. It's been very interesting.
Did you come into this with any type of perceptions, and if so, how are those perceptions met or changed?
Yeah, I've been a Republican all my life, and so I was very interested to come to this convention and just see what it is. I think I was hoping to see a bit more diversity in the party, maybe even different interest groups all kind of represented under what it means to be a Republican, this big umbrella term, and I didn't see that. There is a lot of unity for Trump, and maybe I haven't gotten my identity heard so much since I don't see myself voting for Trump.
How do you see, does this program invite people of all type of political stripes to participate, and how has that benefited you?
I would say definitely, considering that we all are also going to the DNC. It allows us or me to be able to see how the different platforms work and the way they speak or their speeches that are said on the platform.
When you come to an event like this, what do you learn about politics overall?
Yeah, I think it's a great way to see just, the showmanship of it. Obviously there's the grassroots part that's really important. But, great conventions like these, you see grand speeches, of 4-year platforms and, some crazy, fireworks and that sort of thing everywhere. So it's just a really great show. And, I've been told from, senior Republicans on the Hill, it's just a week-long party and to celebrate, the 4 years and look forward to, winning an election and seeing what that's going to look like going forward. So
3 students from Cornell University out and amongst folks here at the RNC. To all of you, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
On Wall Street today, the Dow down 533, NASDAQ down 125, S&P down 43. Story from CNN, President Joe Biden announced another round of student loan debt forgiveness Thursday, totaling $1.2 billion for 35,000 public sector workers, including teachers, nurses, and firefighters. The borrowers qualify for the debt relief through the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, which was created nearly 2 years ago and expanded by the Biden administration's efforts to make it easier to qualify. The administration is eager to show how it has canceled more federal student loan debt than any prior administration, now totaling more than $168 billion for nearly 4.8 million Americans, despite its signature one-time student loan forgiveness program getting knocked down by the Supreme Court last year. That reporting from CNN. And from NBC News, Israel's parliament, the Knesset, on Thursday voted overwhelmingly to reject the establishment of a Palestinian state, reflecting the deepening decline in support for a two-state solution among wider Israeli society. The vote came as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu prepares to travel to the United States to address a joint session of Congress and meet with President Joe Biden, who has been vocal in pushing for a two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. That was from NBC News. John Kirby is White House National Security Communications Advisor. He took questions about this during an online audio-only news conference.
You've mentioned a few times that it will take a lot of political courage regarding Israel and, a future Palestinian state. But I guess my question is, look, Israel's political opposition hasn't stepped up, and the Knesset just broadly rejected a two-state solution with this resolution. I mean, what is the administration's plan B moving forward on this in the Middle East strategy here?
It's not about a plan B. It's still about plan A, which is moving towards the possibility of a two-state solution. And nobody is blind here to how difficult that's going to be. We believe that the first priority has got to be getting a ceasefire. Getting the ceasefire deal in place, getting those hostages back with their families where they belong, getting a 6 weeks of calm. That's phase one. If we get phase one, then negotiations can begin on phase two. And phase two, as the president said himself last May, can get us to a permanent cessation of the hostilities. If you can get that, then you can begin to really start to lay the groundwork for post-conflict governance in Gaza that is free of Hamas, but also free of challenges to the security of the Israeli people. And then you can really start laying some tracks towards a potential two-state solution over the long haul. I mean, one of the things that we were working on, as you know, before the war was normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel. We have indications that both sides are still interested in pursuing that outcome. And so if you can do that, that's another big milestone, potentially towards a more integrated Israel in the region and the possibility of a two-state solution. So we're still on plan A. And we believe that that effort is worth the time and the energy to put into it, and that's what we're focused on.
John Kirby, White House spokesperson, during a virtual audio news conference today. He also said he's not sure how President Biden's COVID-19 diagnosis will affect the planned meeting next week with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. From Fox News, the U.S. military has started shutting down operation of the hugely expensive and troublesome Pier into the Gaza Strip, citing difficulties with distribution as a key factor in the decision. President Biden, during his State of the Union speech in March, pledged to establish a temporary pier in the Mediterranean Sea off the coast of the Gaza Strip to increase the delivery of humanitarian aid to the territory as millions remain displaced while Israel continues to hunt Hamas. That reporting from Fox News. The Pentagon Deputy Press Secretary Sabrina Singh had more on this at her news conference.
U.S. Central Command has been executing operations to surge humanitarian aid into Gaza through air, land, and sea. Yesterday, the Department of Defense announced that the temporary pier, or the joint logistics over-the-shore capability that has been used to surge humanitarian assistance into Gaza through a maritime corridor, has concluded its operations. With collaboration from 12 nations, international partners, USAID, and the United Nations, the temporary pier successfully delivered nearly 20 million pounds of aid, which is the highest volume of humanitarian assistance the U.S. military has ever delivered into the Middle East. The temporary pier achieved its goal of providing an additive means of delivering high volumes of humanitarian aid to the people of Gaza. In the coming days, CENTCOM will work with USAID to deliver the remaining aid commodities currently afloat to the port of Ashdod in Israel for onward distribution to Gaza, and will provide coordination and liaison support for humanitarian aid deliveries at the request of USAID when appropriate.
Pentagon Deputy Press Secretary Sabrina Singh opening up her news conference today at the Pentagon. Senator Roger Wicker, Republican of Mississippi, ranking member on the Armed Services Committee, putting out a statement. This chapter might be over in President Biden's mind, but the national embarrassment that this project has caused is not. The only miracle is that this doomed-from-the-start operation did not cost any American lives. I have been calling for an end to this election year gimmick since its prime-time inception at the State of the Union. While I'm glad it is finally concluded, we cannot buy back the $230 million needlessly spent, and significant questions remain about the Biden administration's poor planning for this mission. That was a statement from Republican Senator Roger Wicker. From the Washington Examiner, political commentator Lou Dobbs has died at the age of 78. Former President Donald Trump announced. Dobbs, known for hosting shows on CNN and Fox News Channel, was a supporter of the former president, who announced his death in a post on Thursday. Lou Dobbs was on C-SPAN's Afterwards program back in September 2020.
You worked on and off for CNN for some 30 years. Mm-hmm. You had a variety of shows. You were not an orthodox Republican. You were obviously not a liberal Democrat. Could you go back into that environment today, or someone like you? Or what was the calculus or the formula that allowed you to exist for 3 decades? Did you have a particular relationship with Ted Turner, or just enlighten us a little bit at the fact of development?
Well, it was helpful that I joined CNN in 1980 at the beginning. I was one of the founders of CNN, one of the fortunate ones who was there I was president of creation, as they say. And it was a spectacular place to work as we built it, because it was something unthought of before Ted Turner. The global cable news cast, and he put it into action and institutionalized it. It was really, truly remarkable. But it changed over time, as these things do. And we founded it in 1980, and by 1984, Ted was on the Forbes the wealthiest list, and had been basically on the verge of bankruptcy, as just 4 years earlier when he founded it. So his position changed, so did ours. Suddenly we're in the White House pool, we're growing. And over time, Ted's commitment to a more liberal approach to the news became far more serious and emphatic. And by 1999, it was clear that it was going to be a tough balancing act. But at that point, I wasn't so much an advocacy journalist. By 2009, when we had our final falling out, not with Ted, but with Time Warner, it was just simply a matter of ideology. I was saying as many critical things about George W. Bush, perhaps more, than I ever said about Barack H. Obama. The truth is, they were committed to a different approach. They decided it would be ideological, that there was only room for one point of view instead of a tent with many voices. And I was the only conservative on the air. And obviously that just did not work out. And if anything, it's gone in even more decided fashion to the left, rather than to either independent journalism or to moderation, as you know.
Lou Dobbs on C-SPAN's Afterwards program back in 2020, interviewed by Victor Davis Hanson, author and Hoover Institution Senior Fellow. Dobbs was on to talk about his new book, The Trump Century, How Our President Changed the Course of History Forever. Lou Dobbs has passed away at the age of 78. Former President Donald Trump, the Republican presidential nominee this year, putting out a statement. The great Lou Dobbs has just passed away, a friend and truly incredible journalist, reporter, and talent. He understood the world and what was happening better than others. Lou was unique in so many ways and loved our country. Our warmest condolences to his wonderful wife, Debbie, and family. He will be greatly missed. The Independent newspaper writes that Dobbs was fired from Fox News in February 2021 following the filing of a $2.7 billion defamation lawsuit by the voting machine company Smartmatic over his persistent platforming of Trump's false claims about a stolen election. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Have a great night.